has been paid for by the Celtic World Order.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome back to Celtic World Order. I'm always Steve O'Matt in the Hart, and today it's my pleasure to be joined with our Ross McCafferty. A wee bit of a different thing that we'll do today. Obviously, we've got a big cup final building up to the weekend, and we will be here to cover that in some good depth as the week goes on. There's a few things, obviously, that we need to address because there's going to be a couple of departures after that cup final. There's going to be a few voids that we need to fill out, and we're going to have a look at it and say, what are the options as what we got in already? Are they worth keeping? And we'll talk over some general stuff as well as looking back over the weekend because we've not spoke to Josh, and we'll look towards the cup final. Before we do that, of course, a wee bit of housekeeping. We say it all the time, our operation is small, but it is slowly and steadily growing. We thank every single person who's taking the time to share our content, to subscribe and to follow us. If you want to help us out further, if you haven't done so already, it takes you 2 seconds. Make sure you hit that subscribe icon. Give us a wee thumbs up if you like what you're seeing here, and you can share our content. Just gets more eyes in here, gets the community growing, and we're already enjoying that, and it's doing well so far. You can also get us on X, of course, at CWPod1888. So that's that out the way. Josh, as we says, it's been a while since we've had a wee chat, yourself and I. Believe you were also celebrating the weekend, albeit you were there in another sort of working professional capacity. So I've had a chance to hear your thoughts. How did it get down for yourself, mate? Did you enjoy your weekend?
Yeah, it was good. Trophy day is always a good day out, especially. Obviously, the game doesn't mean anything, but the celebrations after it, and especially another result in the day, which means Celtic finished 8 points clear at the top of the table, was really good. So a really good weekend for Celtic, and just building that momentum towards cup final again. Obviously, you want to pick up the victory on Trophy Day, and it's good to see Luis Palma get the goal at the end. Whether he warranted that Man of the Match award or not, I'm not entirely sure. I think I've spoke to a lot of people who agree with me on that he probably shouldn't have got that, but good to see Joe Hart get the send-off he did as well, because he fully deserved that. He's been absolutely excellent for Celtic over the 3 years he's been at the club. 3 league titles in 3 years, you cannot argue with that. Hull hopefully gets another cup to bow out on at the weekend. So yeah, really good weekend following Celtic. Obviously got the chance to speak to Greg Taylor, James Forrest and Brendan Rodgers after the game, so that was really good as well. All 3 guys were brilliant, obviously in quite a chipper mood with the league winners' medals around their necks. So yeah, really good weekend, and hopefully it's another good weekend this Saturday.
And was there any pearls of wisdom from those players? Or were they all?
I would say they were all pretty, as you would expect from players when they're doing media. They're not, they don't give much away. But Brendan Rodgers is a class act. It wasn't even on the agenda that we were going to actually speak to him, but he came down and came out for the tunnel where we were standing, just pitch side, and shook everyone's hand and spoke to us all. And really good. He's a class act with things like that at times, Brendan Rodgers. So hats off to him for that. And it was really good speaking to him and the guys as well, and who've both been called into the Scotland squad. Fully deserved, both of them. So good to see. Yeah.
We'll touch on that as well. As I say, the game, Paddy and I had a wee talk about it, and as we said on that show, it was very much a means to an end, wasn't it? It was nice to get a victory. Of course, it was nice to get the title, formally presented and all that, and the party goes. But the result, no matter how it came about, we did have a wee chat about the sort of changes, as you'd imagine, by a cup final. It's all about protecting your assets, wasn't it? And we spoke as well about, we saw guys like Malik Narodsky. We obviously saw Ralston, who I was actually very impressed with, and we had Palma, who you mentioned, and the likes. Out of those guys, I know it's a one-off game, and I know that there's really not too much that can be read into it. Were you, in any level, perhaps disappointed? Obviously, Welsh get the injury. He didn't cover himself in glory, but what did you think of the guys like Narodsky and Welsh that get brought in? Because obviously we're looking ahead, looking at the future.
Yeah, I thought Mike Nawrocki had a really good game. I've been calling him for him to get a lot of minutes recently. Obviously, Liam Scales, coming on here after the Aberdeen semi-final, and we were tearing Liam Scales apart. I think perhaps rightly so for his performance that day. And Mike Nawrocki comes into the team at the weekend, and I think he was a lot of the things that Scales isn't, in terms of getting beyond the halfway line and actually making a dynamic, good pass that perhaps Scales can't. I thought he defended really well as well. There's one in the second half where he made a really good challenge, a goal-saving challenge, arguably, Nawrocki. Obviously, Welsh is Welsh, isn't he? He never really catches your eye 100%. Obviously, caused the penalty, come off injured probably his celebrations were a bit dampened by having his arm in a sling, which was a bit disappointing for him. But other guys that come into the team, I thought Palma was all right. Palma was Palma, do you know what I mean? He's like not entirely consistent. He'll be frustrating at times, but he can come up with a goal, like we've seen at the end of the game. Tony Ralston, really good performance at right back. I think he's always dependable whenever you call upon him. The derby last weekend, Tony Ralston came into the game, I think it was 20 minutes to go when Alistair Johnston was injured. And I don't think he'd played in a long while, Ralston. It must have been 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. But he came into that game and he was really, really good in terms of just stopping Rangers from getting any real threats on the attack. And throughout the 90 against St Mirren the weekend, he was really good again. Obviously set up the winning goal with a brilliant cross from him.
A great cross, great ball in.
Yeah, he's always a threat going forward. And you need guys like that, guys like Tony Ralston and arguably Stephen Welsh to a certain extent. James Forrest falls into this category where it's your core group of Scottish players who know the club, who will count towards the homegrown quota for Europe and can come in when you need them and be reliable. And that's what Celtic have in guys like Tony Ralston and James Forrest. Callum McGregor's slightly above that category just because he's the lead, he's the captain, he's a key player. But yeah, it was a lot of encouraging signs at the weekend, I would say. But you don't expect the team to really, they don't have much to play for. It's much a psychological thing where it's just, doesn't really matter. I don't think anyone was really concerned or annoyed when it was 2-2, 3-2. Like, you seen the celebrations for the goal. Usually for a last minute winner like that in the league for 3 points, Parkhead would be limbs is the phrase. Yeah, whereas it was just a kind of stand up and applaud because we're getting the trophy in 5 minutes anyway. It doesn't really matter. So
no, 100%.
Good to pick up the 3 points anyway.
So they obviously mentioned on those players there, and just to briefly on whilst we're on topic there, looking ahead. Probably, I'd imagine, maybe you'll know a wee bit more from being there. The situation with Alistair Johnston, is that a knock? Because out of them all, I certainly think out of them all, you were slightly impressed with Nawrocki. I don't think he particularly was tearing up trees, relatively dependable. This is Welsh is what Welsh was. But Ralston I was quite impressed with. Now, obviously, as we look towards the massive game at the weekend, is he for you the most likely that would get brought in? And have you any information? Have you heard any whisperings if that situation with Johnston's maybe going to force Ralston to have to start?
I think Johnston's absolutely fine. That's the thing. He was, before the game at the weekend, the trophy day, he was front and centre of all Celtic's media photos on Instagram, Twitter, and things like this. Rodgers said in the press conference, I think that he's absolutely fine. This was before the game against St Mirren, and he didn't play, so I don't assume he's going to have had any further knocks or anything. So I think it's full steam ahead with Johnston for the final, and that was just to give him a rest, much like it was to give Carter Vickers and Maeda a rest at the weekend. And like you say, you've got a guy like Ralston who can come in and do a good job for you.
Well, that's it. He didn't do himself any harm, and certainly as we see, we'll go on as well with the call-ups for the Scotland squad are very well earned, and certainly with that level of determination, that level of grit, there's always a place for guys like that in all squads, including internationals. But as we say, we're here to talk about this, aren't we? We say filling the void. There's big decisions ahead for Celtic, moving into a summer of excess in terms of finance, looking towards the Champions League new format, the riches that come with that, and obviously defending the league, and hopefully after the weekend, the cup as well. So I believe this was something that you were wanting to talk about, and you were wanting to sort of look at the guys that we do have on loan, as Idah and Bernardo in particular. So I guess I'll let yourself, I'll hand it over to yourself, and you can put the pros, the cons, the case for and the case against, as it was for it, and we'll see if there is worthwhile keeping these guys on, eh?
Yeah, so I think there's one of the key debates in the Celtic support right now is the Adam Idah debate about whether you sign him or not. I think there's a lot of people on the for side than there was at the not side at the minute, and that will probably be the case as we go into summer. But just looking at, we'll start with Idah, then we'll go on to Bernardo in a minute, because I think Idah's the more prominent figure right now, just from what he's given Celtic over the past couple of weeks and since he's joined the club. But obviously joining in, it was actually February signed because his deadline day was the 1st of February. He was brought in, but came in with much maligned. I don't think, obviously the pod wasn't up and running then, but I wasn't entirely excited about the signing. I certainly backed the boy, 100%, thought he could come in and score a few goals here and there. Did I think he was going to have the impact that he has? Absolutely not. I didn't think he was going to come in and score some title-defining goals, but just on paper, he made his debut up with Tawdry and came on, made a decent impact in that game. Celtic dropped points that day, set up Nicholas Kuhn for the goal, and then it was really the game after that. His first Celtic start, we really set it alight, scoring 2 penalties. Easter Road against Hibs, and last minute one as well, under pressure. Absolutely crucial. And then started the next 2 games against Kilmarnock and St Mirren, didn't score, and then comes on at half time at Fir Park. I think not just for Idah but for Celtic as a whole, this was a real turning point in this season.
Yeah,
I
I
look
definitely agree with that.
at half time, Celtic are 1-0 down, 5 points behind in the title race. Idah comes on 5 minutes into the second half, scores, and then goes and scores at the last minute as well. 2 crucial goals that help Celtic really go on to get the momentum shifted in their favour, I would say. And from then on, Celtic have only lost 1 game, and that was at Tynecastle. And that was a write-off in itself, let's be honest.
I've covered that enough.
It doesn't really count. But just on paper, so his stats in the league, 15 matches. He's only started 5, and he has 8 goals and 2 assists. In the league, he's played 608 minutes, and that works out as a goal contribution every 60 minutes. So that's a goal contribution every hour for a guy who has come in 23 years old. He doesn't have a lot of experience playing at a team where the mentality is that you need to win every week. He's been playing for Norwich in the lower end Premier League. I think that experience of playing in the Premier League and sort of high end English Championship has certainly helped him since joining Celtic. The case for him signing, I think the arguments for it, for me, outweigh the arguments not to sign him. Number one, he knows what the club means, and that's shown with, number one, his upbringing in Ireland. Most of his family are Celtic fans. And number two, just how he's conducted himself since he's joined the club. He is clearly passionate. He knows what he's saying in the media and things like that about Celtic. A lot of people write this off, but the wee tattoo he has of the clover on his bicep, he has that. And so that's one thing. And I hate going back to Georgios Giacomakis, but when he was at Celtic, he was second fiddle to Kyogo, and he wasn't happy, and that's why he eventually left the club. Idah so far is relatively happy not starting every game and coming on and making the impact he is. So that's a plus. And also the fact he's 23 years of age.
Yeah, he's still quite young. There's a lot of growing there.
He only turned 23 in February, so he's not even 24 until next February. Like you say, a lot of growth still to come out of this guy, and that takes me on to the next point about development. So I don't think he's fully developed yet. I don't think he's nowhere near the levels that he can reach. I think he's got 2-3 more years to go. I look at, now this is perhaps where the negatives come into it for me. I look at his performances in the Scottish Cup semi-final against Aberdeen, were perhaps not up to the mark, didn't take his chances, and then as well in the most recent derby at Parkhead, where he failed to put away a couple that should have really killed the game on that day.
Opportunities, absolutely.
100%. Now that's where some of his development, maybe decision making in the key moments, could do with some improvement. And as well, I feel like sometimes when he has the ball at his feet and he looks to make a pass or in his control of the ball at times, he was really good in that at Rugby Park when Celtic won the league a week ago. It was absolutely brilliant. But since then, or in moments before that, when he's got the ball to feet or things like that, I don't think he's been great at it. And that's perhaps somewhere where he needs to improve. I think there's the positives outweigh the negatives. That is my opinion on this one. And you've got the financial side of things. So it's 6 million that Celtic would need to pay to sign Idah. Now, I think whether Celtic should pay this a lot, for me, depends on what the budget is for the summer. So if Celtic are sitting at a budget where Brendan Rodgers has been told you're allowed to spend 30-40 million, 100% go out and spend 6 million of that on Idah. Yeah. But if Brendan Rodgers has been told, you're only getting 15 million plus plus sales, then I would not sign Idah because I think you could probably get someone else for cheaper. But if you've got the money there, 100%, I would sign him up. You look at his record so far, he's proven in the league already a goal contribution every 60 minutes in the league. Scored some crucial goals at Ibrox, Fir Park and Easter Road. And he knows what the club means. He's happy sitting on the bench at times. That's kind of jury's still out on that going into next season if he's going to be on the bench a lot. the manager as well, Brendan Rodgers, clearly likes him, and Brendan Rodgers wants to
He
develop him.
spoke about that, didn't he? He spoke about the
Yeah,
excitement when he got offered the
100%.
proposition to work with him.
Yeah.
So
Certainly. So, Steve, what do you make? Would you, based on the evidence and the facts and stuff, would you?
I mean, yeah, I think I kind of agree with what you're saying. I had a wee look as well, and pretty much what you said there. Obviously, it's about 60 minutes contributing a goal, and I believe it's just around about 90 all in, per goal, if just scoring, which again is pretty good when you look at that short body of work. Yeah, it's undoubtedly that there's the cracks in his game, as we can say, but you can put that down to inexperience. You can put that down to room to improve, as you say. I fully agree with what you're saying, and Paddy and I had this conversation the other day, and I asked him, and I'll just throw it back at you. I says, signing Adam Idah, I think the signing of Adam Idah would largely hinge also on what we do with O, who's sort of been popped out and he's sort of been out the picture. I think it's fair to say that he's probably does not have a future at Celtic. I think you sign Adam Idah as a number 2 minimum.
Yeah.
But one of 3 good strikers. I don't see O being in there. What we do with Kyogo is up for debate. But no, I would agree that I've seen enough from him, and I think sometimes it's easy to get recency bias and we look at the goals and stuff.
Yeah.
You can't minimise the impact that those goals have had and what they've been worth to us. Certainly, as you say, you touched on it, and I would say for me, in terms of an actual season, I feel that Motherwell was a huge turning point in general belief of the team, belief of the fans, belief of myself. But yeah, either he's raw. I thought Kilmarnock showed really what you can get out of him.
Yeah.
And I used this, you said Giacomakis. The name that I used when comparing him was Dembele. Now, I'm not saying that they're the two same thing, but it reminded me, if you remember, similarly, Dembele came in with some experience down south, as is Adam Idah. When he first got a couple of appearances as a sub, he looked like Bambi on ice. He looked like a guy that was lost. He didn't look like he had it. And that year, I've been thinking, who's this guy we've got? And it took 1 or 2 games getting a start, obviously, with the game against Rangers. And that was it. It was like flicking a switch.
Yeah.
I think Adam Idah, for me, shows enough potential that at the right price point, he is worth taking on. Also, as well, you talked about the comparisons to Giacomakis. He's what I use this term I throw about, one that I've just sort of coined myself for whatever reason, but he's like, to me, he's like a hybrid striker because he's big, but he's mobile. He's got the attributes of little guys, smaller guys, and also big burly guys. He can hold up play, he can advance you up the park. So he strikes a right good fine balance between the two, similarly to Dembele did. So I would say at the right price, absolutely, I think they should be looking to get him in the door. And as well, because of those attributes that he's got, I think he's a very sellable asset. Now, I'm not saying that Kyogo isn't a sellable asset, but if you compare, if you put the amount of goals that Kyogo's got into Adam Idah, players will be biting the hand off for him. So for me, I would definitely say he's worth looking at, but it would need to be off a trio of strikers. So yeah, I think that there's value for money in there, and certainly if he kicks on like most strikers should at Celtic and gets a barrel load of goals under his belt, yeah, he could be worth his money at the other end as well.
Yeah, certainly. And that's all of Celtic's business model in terms of transfers and recruitment is that you sign these guys and you eventually do go on to sell them for a large profit. And given the fact already he has experience playing in the Premier League, scored in the Premier League as well, Adam Idah, that will come into play when Celtic, if they sign him, look to sell him 2-3 years down the line to these big clubs that would probably come in for him if he keeps up his rate of scoring for Celtic. And I think you make really good points about the play style as well. I think as well, what shouldn't be overlooked is he offers a totally different dynamic to Kyogo, and that's been shown in just you watch him. And if Celtic are holding on in a game, maybe potentially it's in Europe in the Champions League next season, you're punting the ball up, you can bring Adam Idah on, and he's shown it at times where his hold-up play is fantastic and he can win fouls, scrappy fouls, and he knows how to do that. And that's because of his experience at playing at Norwich, where they've had to do that at times because they've been a relegation-threatened side. So, yeah,
we did see that, as well, just to touch on that, what you say is, with regards to the Champions League, we saw that benefit, albeit in flashes, from Giacomakis. These seasoned defenders in the Champions League, they're so used to playing that continental style with the balls on the ground, so they are very well versed in guys like Kyogo and those wee fine runs to null them out. But when we got guys like Giakoumakis coming, as you say, he was winning you fouls, he was causing issues, and sometimes that almost rudimentary route one's a great option to have going into these kind of games.
Yeah, 100%. Certainly isn't. That's what you need when you have 2-3 strikers at the club. You don't want them to be two types of similar players. And Kyogo and Idah couldn't be more opposite. But when he does get going, he is really quick. Look at the goal. His goal against Kilmarnock last Wednesday. Takes the ball in, and see when he was driving towards goal and he plays the ball out wide, the speed he was running at was brilliant. And 6'3" as well. He does cover ground, and he's a good presser. And Brendan Rodgers, like we've touched on, wants to work with him. He's eager to work with him. And I feel like when Brendan can develop players really well, we've seen it with Moussa Dembele. He brought him in as an unknown quantity from Fulham and sold him on as a £20 million striker to Lyon in Ligue 1. So Idah can certainly fall into that category 100%. And he's not as if it's an O type scenario where he's coming in from South Korea. We don't know what he's going to bring. He's still only always like 20, 21 when he joined. We weren't entirely sure about him. Played for South Korea at the World Cup.
Yeah.
That's all we kind of knew. Whereas with Idah, he comes in at 23, fit and firing, scoring for Celtic, scoring for Ireland as well, and has that experience of playing in lower-end Premier League Championship football. So I would...
Do you think that, do you buy into that? We talk about settling period, just being in British football owns worth its weight in gold as well, bringing a guy in?
Perhaps it could be. I would certainly say settling period at the club is massive, having the 6 months, even just living in Glasgow and getting used to the surroundings and even the pressures of playing for Celtic. Although you know the club and you're a supporter of the club, you don't know what the actual pressure is until you're in that environment playing for Celtic, where as much as we fans feel it when Celtic draw a game, it's like it's playing in your head for the next week. But if it's a player, it's a even worse story, I would argue, where you're getting criticised left, right and centre for pundits, for the newspapers. So even getting used to that can be difficult for certain players, and I think we've seen that with some guys that have come into Celtic perhaps last summer that have potentially struggled to adapt. But yeah, Adam, it'll be one. Personally, I think if the funds are available, Celtic will sign him. I could see it happening, but it just depends. Number 9, it would be the marquee signing as well of the summer if we brought him in.
Yeah, it definitely will be one that I think fans, if you done a cross-section vote, I think most fans would be in favour. There's just something there that I actually was quite interesting. You mentioned about the Ireland thing and playing for Ireland and getting caps. Now, Ireland are a team themselves that find themselves a wee bit again in a squad transition themselves. So talking about value, talking about, experience and further down the line, there's no doubt if you're playing for Celtic and you're scoring goals, you're going to get into that Ireland team because options are limited there, eh?
Yeah, 24 caps for Ireland, just about, I think it is, for Adam Idah. So yeah, he's going to get noticed if he's scoring goals for Celtic. He's probably going to be Ireland's number 1 striker. They've got Troy Parrott, who's at Millwall most recently, I think. But apart from that, they don't really have many other guys. And if he's still playing Norwich, not really getting consistent game time down there, is he really going to be in the thoughts? We don't know who the next Ireland manager is going to be. It's John O'Shea who's interim them now, but depending on who it is, maybe Adam Idah comes into favour more and starts getting games a lot more regularly for them, at least starts. But that's the Adam Idah debate. You can let us know what you think of it. I think it's a good debate to have.
I think there's worse headaches to have in there. We've had guys that have come in on loan and have been rubbish. At least we've got a guy that's contributing and we've got something tangible to talk about.
Definitely. You talk about worse debates to have. I think the chat on Paulo Bernardo is a bit less exciting. And it's he scored against Rangers, in fairness to him. So 22 years of age, he is a year younger than Adam Idah. Came in on loan from Benfica, who we had history with, signing Jota, and he was a really successful player. We've seen, made a bit of money from him. He scored a lot of goals against Rangers, decent performances in the Champions League. But I feel when Bernardo came in, I wasn't entirely excited about this one. You look at what he'd done. He was on loan at Paços de Ferreira in Portugal the second half of last season, or for part of last season, 13 appearances for them, and before that he was arguably in the Benfica B team. So he didn't look that decent. But I think Brendan Rodgers showed a lot of faith in him in the Champions League. David Turnbull was predominantly playing the domestic games. David Turnbull was scoring goals, but Rodgers preferred him in Europe, and I think that's just simply because of his legs and dynamism and press resistance, even just pressing forward against teams like Lazio, Feyenoord, Atletico Madrid. Now, Bernardo, 22 games in the league, started 11 times and scored 3 goals and registered 3 assists. Now, his hottest streak of form, we'll all remember it, was around about Christmas time. He got a run in the team because Celtic were, well, Brendan Rodgers was looking to get consistency in the starting lineup ahead of a crucial Glasgow derby. And that was what really kick-started Paulo Bernardo's Celtic career, is that derby. But before he did score up at Dens Park, 3-0 win, Mikey Johnson kind of grabbed the headlines that day, but Paulo Bernardo put in a really good performance, scoring a goal. And then he goes into the derby against Rangers and scores a really good goal. I think the stature of that goal is perhaps overlooked because of how good Kyogo's was that day. Paulo Bernardo's was equally, well, not equally, but it was really good as well, catching it on the volley, edge of the box, firing it past Jack Butland. And then he plays the game against St Mirren a couple of days later, and he played a really good pass into Greg Taylor for a goal that day. Just dinks it over the defence, and Taylor runs on it and scores. Got another assist as well in that game. So that is 4 out of his 6 goal contributions in the league for Celtic that came within about a week of each other. And that's the kind of best we've seen of Paulo Bernardo. And that's been the issue with him, inconsistency in terms of playing, getting minutes in the first place, and performances as well. Because when he initially came in, he didn't really set it alight. People were watching him and he was sort of ghosting games, I would argue. Wasn't standing out as someone who was really taking it by the scruff of the neck. But I feel like that kind of run he did. And then there was a run just about March, April time where he scored away at Livingston. And then it was a cracker that day, actually, in the bottom corner. And then he come on in the Glasgow derby a few days later and set up Idah for what was actually a crucial goal for Celtic.
All the contributors to the subs that day.
And he has shown that Paulo Bernardo can come into games and make an impact on them. And still at 22, I feel like he's a guy who still has a lot of development to go. But the argument for this one, I think, is much more difficult to have, simply because of the price tag. There's not a lot of coherence over the price tag of what Bernardo would be if Celtic were to sign him. There was initial rumours that when he came in, it was going to be £1.5–2 million, and I remember thinking December time, that is an absolute steal. Sign him up for £2 million. But as times went on, there's been chat of 5–6 million, and for a player like that, who is arguably, he's not going to start games next season, depending on what the O'Reilly situation is. I don't know. I'm still 50-50 on Paulo Bernardo whether I'd sign him or not. I just think,
would you extend a loan if that was something?
If that was an option, and you're able to get an option to buy with it, you have a price tag set, like say a 4 million, 5 million, and you give him another year of development at Celtic, perhaps that's a really good shout. I didn't actually think of that, because he'd be 22, 23 turning next summer, and that's the age O'Reilly is now, and that's where you're really expecting these young players to kick on and become big players for Celtic at their age. Adam, another prime example. So if extending the loan is an option, I think it's a good shout, because obviously we talked about the bedding in period. He's kind of had that now for the year, and he's shown glimpses of his talent, and it's just about for Paulo Bernardo gaining the consistency in that, and gaining the consistency, not just in terms of showing his form, but minutes as well. If you can get a run in the team, he's shown that he can actually do all right. Just be interesting to see what happens, because as well, in terms of play style, we've got obviously Rigo Hatate, Callum McGregor, who I would argue are not the most imposing players, at least in terms of height and stature, whereas Paulo Bernardo's about 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", so a bit of a different dynamic in there. At 8/10, but the midfield for me as a whole next season for Celtic is going to be a really interesting point. Talk about it in a minute, but I'll put this back to you, Steve. The Paulo Bernardo debate, what's your take on it?
It's a really, really tough one. Usually when you get guys coming in, don't you kind of have a real, you're one way or another.
Yeah.
Is the epitome of being on the fence for me when it comes to Paulo Bernardo. Yes, as you say, I think one of the things that is really, really telling is that he did feature in all the Champions League games. Now, obviously, there was still shifting about, trying to find the formula. There was a couple of chopping and changing in those games, but he was always used for that, and that could be interesting. In terms of the amount of minutes played, 1,431 minutes for Celtic. That's crazy if you actually think of how many fleeting appearances we've seen him. So he has decent game time. I agree. I don't think that he's necessarily set the header. And he's a steady Eddie for me. He doesn't do it. Can be very unassuming, unremarkable. In some cases, like a Wata. But then the question would beg is, for that amount of money, is he any better than a Wata? And that's the hard part. For me, I think if there's an option to negotiate the price, if he says to me, Bernardo for 3 million, 3.5, maybe at a push, I would say absolutely. But if the quoted figure of 6 million's there, for me, he's just not shown enough to justify that. So I would either be looking for price negotiation, bringing it down, if they wanted to keep him, or certainly even looking, can we extend the loan, but you need to make a decision in January. If you want him, you have to pay for him in January, or he goes back. I think something like that, because as you say, it's the midfield, and I'm sure you've got thoughts on it you want to discuss, but the midfield could be completely transformed.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, I think we're kind of a wee bit consigned to the fact we think that O'Reilly's going to go. I spoke about it, and I says that I wouldn't be surprised if the manager was happy to let Hatate go, because of just some of his comments about how he loses the ball quite a lot and things like that. So we could be looking for a completely different midfield. But for me, Bernardo's an option, not a solution. I think if you remove Hatate, or if you remove O'Reilly, he doesn't solve any of those problems.
Yeah.
So I am very much on the fence. I do apologise. That's not maybe the way folk want to go. I can't split it. I really couldn't split it.
I'm on the fence as well with Paulo Bernardo. Like you say, he's not a solution. I think with a couple of years more development, perhaps he could be the solution. And maybe that comes with, like you say, another loan deal and staying, and then making a decision next January. Just looking at the price tag, the 6 million, you're getting Idah for 6 million.
Yeah.
And they're wanting you to buy Paulo Bernardo for 6 million, who has not made the same difference. I know they're two different players, but if you can get Bernardo, like you say, for £2.5-3 million, 100%, that would be really good business, because he is someone who, if you bring into the club, can really go on and develop and become a player of the ilk of O'Reilly. So when O'Reilly came in, £1.5 million from MK Dons, even last season, a year ago, he was inconsistent under Ange Postecoglou. Aaron Moy was getting more of the minutes, at least in the second half of the season. Under Postecoglou and O'Reilly, only scored about 2-3 goals last campaign. So it shows you how quickly they can set it alight once fully perhaps developed and getting the consistency of starts, not just minutes, getting starts. And O'Reilly has been key this season. It would just be interesting to see what happens, because I think Idah definitely nailed on that most people would sign him, and if the money's available, definitely. But the Paulo Bernardo bait's quite an interesting, a tricky one. Number one, because we don't know the price, and number two, because the midfield situation, like you said, O'Reilly, I think he'll probably go if the right offer comes in. And I really hope Celtic do get a record fee for him. And Hatate, like you say, I'm not entirely convinced Rodgers is fully sold on Rio Hatate yet. Like you say, the comments after the derby where he said he gives the ball away too much. But the one thing about Hatate, you look at since he came back from injury in the middle of March, that's when Celtic's form has been at its best this season.
Absolutely.
And since then, he's got goals, he's got assists, he's been key. So that'll be an interesting debate to be had. I think it's unimaginable if Celtic lost both Hatate and O'Reilly this summer. I think that'd be a massive blow. And I don't think that will happen. No way they'll allow two to go. And I think Rodgers would be incensed if that happened. But like you say, you've got guys like Tomoki Iwata there as well, who are, like you say, steady eddies, who can come in, and Tomoki can take the sting out of a game. He done it really well in the derby at Parkhead, where he just comes in and he simplifies it. He plays a totally different role to Bernardo because he plays in the 6, but he's guys like that you want, who can come in and contribute, even get the odd start here and there. But as Bernardo, that where he can come in and be effective straight away in a game, I don't think so, because you see him come into games with 20 minutes to go and he doesn't really set it alight. He's not as effective, and it is harder for him to do than Iwata, because Iwata's job is simply to play simple passes and take the sting out of it, whereas Bernardo, for someone like him, a number 8 or a number 10, wherever he's playing, you're asking him to create opportunities, score goals, and really make an impact in games. So, be interesting to see. I think with Bernardo, it'll be a case of, to quote, the price is right. That'll be what it is with Bernardo.
The thing is, we spoke about the budget, didn't we? And we says, if, let's just say we go for 5 to 6 million for Idah, and let's say we can, for talking's sake, negotiate that price for Bernardo down to, say, 4 million. Let's just say that, right? That's 10 million. Now, I would anticipate or hope that even if we sold a player now, we had this chat before where we says, yep, Celtic could find themselves financially in a completely different stratosphere from they've ever been, with the money in the bank already, the Champions League, yada, yada, yada. You could be swirling about the sort of 125, 130 million. Now, if I says to you, off that money, if you were to spend 40 million or just over, would you take that right now? I'm sure most fans would. The issue then comes in, if you sell O'Reilly for, say, 25 million or something, folks suddenly assume that your 40 million spend has to become a 50 million spend, and that's not quite the way it works. Now, in terms of the budget, I've seen a couple of people mention, I've seen it swirling around. There's a lot of guys of quality, we'll touch on some here, that are coming up on, particularly when we're looking at the goalkeeper, who are free transfers. I've seen the name Armstrong getting floated about. Now, do these guys make us stronger? Do they make it better? It's up for debate. But if you can fill in guys that are on free contracts, that are quality and pay a good wage, then you then maybe think about saying, well, I will pay that money for these guys.
Yeah,
you know, because
true.
It's not a big chunkier budget in that terms if you're getting more in as well.
Yeah, it's about spreading the funds, isn't it? If Celtic sign, I've seen the name Cohen Castells going about, it'd be a free transfer, but signing him would be an incredible signing, in my opinion, just going by what he's done in Belgium. Belgium international goalkeeper, playing for Wolfsburg, over 270 appearances there. If you got him for free, who would usually be, if he had 2-3 years left in his contract, a 10 million, 50 million pound goalkeeper, that'd be really good business. It's like you say, it's about spreading the funds. If you can get guys like that in, who's going to be your number one goalkeeper for the next 4 or 5 years for free, of course he's going to want a wee signing bonus of 2-3 million. That's absolutely fine. You can.
But that's when you sweeten the knot at the front end,
exactly.
Doesn't it?
Exactly. Just be interesting to see.
And that's the thing. So I mean, obviously we see we've those are the two guys that we have in. Those are the guys that we've got in on loan that are tangible to us, and we've had a wee look at them, and we've sort of says, will we go for these guys? I think Idah would decide. That's one I think the most would say they go for. Bernardo, not so much. So let's look at the other void, the big void we've got to fill, because there's no doubt we're going to have a clear out of goalkeepers. We're probably going to find ourselves without goalkeeper come the summer. So that's very interesting. So a couple of names that have been getting floated about. Now, I have never had my opinion on this, and I'll throw it up to you, and I don't know what you think. I've always says, yes, we'll look at the guy like the Turkish goalkeeper, they're talking 6-7 million, right? Now, for me, I've always says that you can have an excellent goalkeeper on low money to no money, right? I've always championed the notion of treat your goalkeeper as a running bill. The manager said it before. I've said it countless times, where there is very much plenty of room in the Celtic squad for guys who they're a bill. You'd have no sell-on fee. They've got experience, you bring them in, you pay them whatever it is to get them in the door, and if you get your 2 or your 3 years, or maybe even 4 years out of them, you say thank you very much, you shake their hand and you send them out, you rinse and repeat. Now, we've went before, and I'm not saying that we should be put off by it, because we will have the funds to maybe spend 7 million if we wanted a goalkeeper, but we did it with Barkas. He ticked all the boxes, international, Champions League, Europa League, plenty of appearances, and he turned up and he was garbage. Now, I know that doesn't prove or guarantee anything, but I think the options that are here that we'll go through, firstly, Cohen Castells, Belgian, 31. Let's look at his CV. He's been at Wolfsburg now, he's been at Bremen, Hoffenheim, Genk, 357 club appearances. He's kept 109 clean sheets. He's played in the Champions League. He's played European football for Belgium with 6 caps. He's played in the Europa League. His wages, now I understand that there'll be a lot of teams out there wanting to give him big wages, but as you says, looking at him just as the first option, you sweeten them up with these guys. You give them a signing on. Here's 1.5 million. Here's 2 million up front, and then you give them that 35 grand or whatever it is, maybe up to 40 grand. I don't know if we're willing to adjust our wage bracket a wee bit. Is that not a better solution? Again, saving money at the front end, but still getting quality that's proven, than going and hoping that by spending money as well, it's going to work. And just before I pass over, the reason I'm saying that is I will say if we have a very, very good goalkeeper or a very good striker or a very good midfielder, as we're seeing with O'Reilly, your shelf life is usually 2 years. And if you're very, very lucky, 3. And in some cases, they'll take them away after 1 season or 1.5. Now, a goalkeeper's a very, very hard position to fill. But if you go and get a guy who's 31, 32 with all that experience, chances are you're going to get your 3 year out of them.
Yeah,
before you need to
100%.
worry about that again, you know?
Yeah,
So
if you
it's a
sign,
merit there.
if you sign Cohen Castells, I think it'd be a tremendous signing, one of the best Celtic signings over the past couple of years. He was touted for moves to the likes of Bayern Munich 2-3 years ago. This is the level of guy that you'd be looking at bringing in. And on the point about goalkeeper, just kind of renewing it and not spending too much money on it. And Joe Hart's a prime example of that. Signing for £1 million from Spurs, and he comes in and he's given you 3 excellent years of service to the football club. And I think that's just evident how much he's adored here, that the send-off he got at the weekend, you've seen how much he means to the Celtic fans, because he's come in and at a time of instability, come in and done really well. And he's a prime example that if you're shrewd with the money, you can get a good player, a good goalkeeper. Look at Arthur Boric. He was something of an unknown quantity before he joined the club, and not too much money was spent on him, if I'm correct. And comes in and absolutely brilliant, adored by the fans. Massive performances in the Champions League. So good examples of that going in the past, and Cohen Castell's another one. I really like his CV. Like you say, Wolfsburg, Bundesliga experience, top 5 league in Europe, that is. Experience of going to World Cups, going close to getting to World Cup finals with Belgium. Listen, I know he's not playing, he's on the bench, but Courtois playing in front of him, you're not going to replace Courtois in the team. Yeah, exactly. So he's number 2, and in any other generation of Belgian football players, he would be their number 1 goalkeeper. So I think it'd be an excellent signing of Celtic to get that over the line. But like you say, the finances, like the wage structure, is he going to be getting offered 60, 70 grand? So the reports in Belgium this morning are that Anderlecht are willing to go all out for him. Now, for their standard, I don't know what all out is for their standard, but they've not qualified for the Champions League this season. Anderlecht are desperate to sign Castells. There you go. I think Celtic can offer him Champions League football. They can offer him the chance to win trophies, but Anderlecht is his homeland in Brussels, and perhaps that maybe
a draw, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. It's much more of a draw than coming up to Glasgow, where he's never been before. He's lived in Europe his whole life, mainland Europe at least. So it'll be interesting to see. I would love Celtic to sign the boy.
I suppose as well, it's all about having a conversation. You know, as Paddy likes to say, you know, shy wains don't get sweets. You've got to ask. There's nothing.
100%,
what is the worst that could happen? You get the manager, or oh God, I wouldn't send any of the board, but you get somebody that can speak well, and you get them to sell the dream, and you put it to them, because listen, Celtic are a massive club, make no doubt about it, and it all then comes down to, what does this guy want? Does he want to wind down his homeland and just coast away, or does he want one last sort of in the the thick of it? And again, I know it's only 8 games in the Champions League at the front end, of course it is, but you can say, look at Joe Hart, look at this, and it's an option. I think certainly one of the profile that I would like to definitely look at. If we look at the other name that's been thrown out there, and it was obviously one that Postecoglou had been mentioned, and again, I didn't really know too much about him till I had a wee peek, and that's Matt Ryan. Again, 32, so you're going to get the minimum out of him. Let's look at his CV. He's played in La Liga, Premier League, Champions League, Europa League. He's been on the books at Alkmaar, Copenhagen, Sociedad, Arsenal, Brighton, Genk, Valencia, and Bruges.
Yeah, he's been about, hasn't he?
153 club appearances, 152 clean sheets, and 93 international caps for Australia. We'll maybe turn our nose up at these guys, maybe not so much Castells, but Matthew Ryan doesn't sound like a very, how do we say it sometimes, sexy name.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can't
he's-
look at that CV and ignore it, can you?
Yeah,
Particularly if it's free.
just because he sounds like a guy you'd meet down the pub doesn't mean he'd be a really good signing for Celtic. The name is not extravagant, but the CV is. Like you say, the clubs he's been at. This is a point my dad raises all the time when Celtic go to sign players. Now, whether it's good or not, I'm not sure, but he always says if the player plays for their country and they've got over about 20 caps for their country, they're going to be a decent level and
Yeah,
perhaps a good
they should
enough level for Celtic. And you look at Matt Ryan, we've seen Celtic have had several Australian internationals over the years. Tom Rogic, Aaron Moyes, another one. Listen, I know Marco Tallio's still on the books at the minute, but that's an entirely different story. Daniel Arzani in that category as well. But Matthew Ryan, I remember seeing the notice on Twitter a couple of months ago. It was just before Joe Hart, or just after Joe Hart retired, that he was going to be leaving Alkmaar at the end of the season.
Mhm.
And I remember saying at the time, the game after it, I was going up to the game with people I go to the game with, saying he would be a really good option for Celtic. I wants to sign him, and sure as fate, that's one of the names that's been banded about the now. And I think this Celtic could do a lot worse than bringing him in.
Yeah,
It'll probably be a deal that's similar to when you brought Joe Hart in. You get him for free,
absolutely.
32. You get the 3-4 years out of him, and then repeat the cycle again.
Yeah,
And he's an elite level goalkeeper. AZ Alkmaar, good team in the Netherlands, Copenhagen, Brighton in the Premier League, experience, been at
a lot of
Valencia
experience
this
there.
season there, Bruges, and like you say, that Australian experience playing. Would they have won the Asian Cup with Australia, I wonder? Because he's been playing with them since 2013.
Possibly.
He probably did.
Mhm.
Playing at World Cups as well, so he's a name I'd be excited about as well. I think they'd both
Mhm.
equally be good signings.
Yeah. Do you think as well? I mean, obviously, when we talk about, because it's easy to get blinded, isn't it, by the finances that will be made available. And as I say, sometimes we as fans, we deserve more. Of course we do. We do deserve more. But you've got to look at the options. And I always say, if you're going to have that problem to solve a position,
Yeah.
goalkeepers one is notoriously hard. So I would much rather look at these options, as I say, that have got a shelf life, that chances are they are not going to come in for them.
Yeah.
They're going to come to you and they're going to finish themselves up. They'll probably come in a 2-year contract and think, right, I'm going to be 33, 34, but like Hart, maybe extend it on a wee year. That's for me the best solution. You pay these guys and they pay you back in, what they do on the park at the time. Other positions, I would expect to invest money and then sell on, and you can think of that. But for me, I just think it's very sound business sense to get in. There's a plethora. I've championed it millions of times. You look at these guys are out of contract. But if you then dip down to other teams in Europe or down south, if you look at their number 2 and even some cases their number 3 goalkeepers, they're usually fantastic, well-experienced goalkeepers that most teams would take. So it's not cheaping out by going for these guys, I don't think.
No, it's not. 100% not.
And that's another thing as well. Both these goalkeepers are good with their feet. And we know that that's something that we kind of like to do.
Especially in the modern day and the way Brendan Rodgers plays football, you want these guys to be good with the ball at their feet. Obviously, within their age group, the likes of these older goalkeepers at the peak of the end of their careers, it's not pretty common. I think we've seen that with Joe Hart, although he can play it in and around the 6-yard box and his 18-yard box. He's not going to be like Ederson, let's just say, out in his own final third, playing those kind of dynamic passes. But if they're sufficient enough to do it Heart's done, then good. And when you're presenting the case to sign for Celtic, like all these guys will be presented with by, like you say, we don't know who's doing it. And they'll say, look at Joe Hart, look at the send-off he's just got in the season gone by, come in, esteemed professional like these guys are. Maybe they're not at the calibre of Joe Hart in terms of name and stature and what they've done throughout their careers, but they're certainly up there. And if they come in for 3 years, they show the passion, they give 100% to the club and the fans, and they put in decent 7, 8 out of 10 performances every week, then they will be adorned by the support. And certainly that's what these guys are capable of doing and coming into the club and doing.
Well, the last one, and I hate to say it because I always say, we spoke about Armstrong, we say never go back sometimes, never go back to your ex. The last one that's came out was, of course, and you'd listen, it's going to get chucked into it, was Fraser Foster has been told by Ange Postecoglou that to do, ta-da, you can go up the road, see you later, mate. He's had his big paycheck. He's had his big, massive, fat paycheck. And we were obviously interested in him at the last time. Is that one is that far too far down the line for you? Is that one that's dead and buried, leave it to lie? Or again, do you look and just say, do you know what? He knows his time's up. He knows that he's retiring and he might just fancy it.
If Fraser Forster was 5 years younger, I would sign him for Celtic. He's 10 months younger than Joe Hart.
Yeah.
And Joe Hart's just retired. So, no, I would not sign him. Unless he was coming in and you get rid of Siegrist and you bring in Forster and a free as your number 2 goalkeeper. Because you look at, he knows the club, he's been there, he's an experienced pro, and you're going to need to make up for some of that leadership within the dressing room when Hart leaves. Then maybe you bring him in as a number 2 for a last hurrah. But no, I would not sign him as the number 1 goalkeeper. 100%.
Yeah.
I think he's over the hill now.
And the last one that's out there, our Paddy's championing it. I don't know where this is coming from, and it's a few folk have mentioned it, is Angus Gunn.
Yeah,
Is that someone at all that if he were realistic, if he were someone that was achievable, do you see enough in him to think, yeah, I mean, for me personally speaking, yeah, the age and stuff might be a wee bit more favourable, but I don't prefer him as an option to what we just spoke about a Colin Casteels or a Matty Ryan.
Yeah, I'd rather a Ryan or a Casteels, to be honest, rather than Angus Gunn. Watched him for Scotland and he's done all right. He's not been a standout Scotland goalkeeper. I go to most of the games at home at Hampden and he's not really capable of pulling off a wonder save or putting in a Fraser Forster-esque Betfred Cup final performance. He's not kind of that ilk of goalkeeper. And as well with Angus Gunn, you probably have to buy him as well because I think he's still contracted at Norwich.
Yeah, that's correct.
And that's a point that if Castells or Matt Ryan's available for free and Norwich are going to want 4 or 5 million for Angus Gunn, I know who I would much rather, and it's certainly Castells or Ryan.
Yeah, I'd much rather give that. As I say, whatever way contracts work, you sweeten that nut. You give them that whatever it is at the front end, and then you give them a decent enough wage to kind of top it up. So no, I think for me, as far as that debate goes, there's going to be a lot of this, but we are going to need to fill up because my understanding is Siegrist is told he can go, and despite reports, I believe that actually Bain's contract is going to be up. So
yeah, I've heard that as well. Scott Bain, that would be. This is
the gravy train is running out for the Bain.
Yeah, I know it's a wee shame.
It's
a wee shame. He's had the role all of us would probably want in this Celtic team over the past 6 years. Just be sitting in the background, enjoying the banter every week, being the morale boosting teammate. That
must be something done.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, I bet he's good crack. Funny story about Bain. He was on my Ryanair flight to Mallorca last summer, last June for press week. So, I mean, that tells you the extravagant lifestyle that he's living compared to probably some of his teammates. But Bain's been a good servant to the club, and it just strengthens the need now that you probably need 2 goalkeepers because Siegrist will go. And I would argue that you probably want a Scottish goalkeeper as your number 2, just so it's counts towards homegrown quota for Europe and it allows you to kind of have a bit more leeway in the outfield.
Would we be able to upgrade our youth goalkeeper and make him the number 3 and then have a sitting 1-2? Would that count towards our quota? Would that be a nice around it?
I think in terms of the squad, so we had 3 goalkeepers in the squad last year and they put Joe Morrison in the squad. He's a Scottish young goalkeeper. Funny story, he played actually when Celtic played Feyenoord in the last game of the group stage last year. He played in the B team game in the afternoon and was on the bench for the first team at night, which was quite incredible. But so they had him in the squad, and I think it was either one of Siegrist or Bain was in the squad as well. So, I mean, you could even just put Joe Morrison as your number 2 for next season.
Yeah.
But I think that's a bit much of a risk that the manager's probably not willing to take. He's seen suggestions of Liam Kelly, but he's off to Rangers now by the looks of things.
Yeah.
Which
I think
bullet dodged. I think if you're going to promote a goalkeeper, I wouldn't probably be against it, but I think there's a couple of Scottish goalkeepers you could get as your number 2, perhaps for cheap.
So, on another, to really quickly touch on the last bit of sort of news around that's been swirling around out, other than chat towards the cup final. Obviously, we'd seen the Scotland squad announced, and that was great to see Forrest getting in there, Taylor getting in there, and obviously Ralston. But we also see a young chap who is Ben Doak has got himself in there. Now, that begs the question about one of our own who are trying to tie down on a contract, and it appears that Bayern Leverkusen are interested in that. So this is your field of expertise.
Yeah,
What do you think the chances of us keeping are?
I think the chances of us Celtic keeping Daniel Kelly are down to the guarantees that Bayer Leverkusen give him and the guarantees that Celtic give him over game time and the development plan. I'm sure Bayer Leverkusen, when they present their case to sign Daniel Kelly, they'll give him a PowerPoint, a presentation of why he should join the club. Going over to Germany, just won the Bundesliga in the Europa League final tonight, in the German Cup final on Saturday against Kaiserslautern, which they should win. So they should be the invincible treble winners. And Xabi Alonso's staying next season. He's confirmed that. So the chance to work under him perhaps could be a pulling factor for young Daniel Kelly. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be up to the player to decide. I think Celtic really have they can't chuck money at a young player. Bayer Leverkusen could probably offer him more money. They can't give him false guarantees and say to him, if you stay with us, we'll start you in 70% of the league games. You can't say that to him because that's realistically not going to happen. I just hope the young guy stays. I think he has a talent, and Brendan Rodgers clearly likes him and has faith in him because he's played him a couple of times this season. Scored against Dundee, but Daniel Kelly will look at guys like Josh Doig, Aaron Hickey, and Lewis Ferguson, now young Scottish players who've gone abroad to the continent. Max Johnston, who's just won a double in Austria with Slumgrass, who have excelled and done really well. And Aaron Hickey's a prime example. He's now playing the Premier League for Brentford. So he will look at that and perhaps say, well, if I go out to Leverkusen, get an opportunity, take it, I could end up like one of these guys and really become a star for a team that's flying at the top of the Bundesliga. But like Jerry's just said in the comments there, would he get a start for Bayer Leverkusen for a while? This is the question.
Well, the biggest thing I'd like to sort of just quickly interject there is I fully understand and appreciate what you say about all these guys from Scotland that have took a chance on themselves, but they have went to peripheral clubs. Now, Ben Doak appears to be the exception and not the rule so far. You'll be able to tell me, because it comes, who was the young chap that went to Bayern Munich from Celtic and then found himself, I think, playing at Queen's Park and the likes? So is that a word of caution as well?
Perhaps. So Barry Hepburn went to Bayern Munich and he was on loan at Queen's Park first half of this season or the second half of last season, one of the two. And it didn't work out for him. And it's perhaps the same situation with Liam Morrison, who went from Celtic to Bayern Munich, and he's now just had a season on loan with Sean Maloney, funnily enough, at Wigan. So maybe that's, like you say, a wind of caution, but there's success stories as well, like you see with Johnston and Hickey and Ferguson and the like. But Ben Doak is an exception to the rule. I think Ben Doak's an exceptional talent, and that's shown by the fact he's 18 and he could be, I think it's one of the youngest Scotland players, at least in the past 50, 60 years, if he gets the nod in one of the games upcoming. So it's really good to see, obviously, ex-Celtic player. I don't think Celtic could have done anything to keep Ben Doak when he was going to Liverpool. It would have been very difficult. And it's kind of the same with Kelly. I think the offer is on the table. There's going to be talks later on in the week with Kelly about the new contract, where he's going to stay. If he does go to Leverkusen, Celtic are going to get nothing out of it apart from 500 grand in compensation and then perhaps a sell-on fee, which, to be fair, they've done pretty well with in Jeremy Frimpong if he goes this summer. But I don't know. Then it shows the talent that Kelly is that you've got Leverkusen looking at him as well, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's obviously showing that there's hope there within the squad, but well, we're coming up on the hour mark, so I suppose it's been a good chat, something a wee bit different to look forward to. As you said, obviously we've got the big cup final coming up at the weekend, and we'll be covering that. We'll be back to discuss that as well. But just to get a wee quick snapshot of your thoughts on that ahead of the time there, confidence high would it be? Are you expecting more of the same for us?
Yeah, I'm not entirely nervous for the game. In fact, I think the fact Celtic have just won the league and been exceptional the past couple of weeks, I think it's given a lot of fans confidence going into this game. People I know who are usually have a bit of trepidation going into the derbies are saying Celtic will win this one 3-4-0, and listen, the momentum's with Celtic going into the game. You look at past couple of performances, Celtic are on a winning run. Rangers have won one out of their last 3, and that was a struggle at home to Dundee. So the momentum is in Celtic's favour. Celtic are the favourites, and rightly so. And I think arguably Celtic should be winning the game. You look at the difference in the quality of the squads, difference in the quality of the managers. So yeah, I think Celtic should win the game, but whether they do or not is a totally different story, because we know what can happen. And even just in a league game, VAR can have its say. But in a cup final, it's a massive occasion, and anything can happen.
He's putting you on the spot. He's relentless, isn't he? He's
Prediction.
relentless.
I've said this to a couple of people. I say 2-0 Celtic is my prediction. So
no, I would prescribe to that. I think it'll be good. It'll be good to see nearer the time. Of course, we'll get the press conference on Friday. We'll get a real taste of where we are with things there. So no, I am feeling confident getting into it. I think we're a team that have managed to protect all our assets. Whereas if we look across, Rangers played a lot of guys, and there's still question marks over who they're going to get. You can only beat what's put in front of you, but I fully expect, and I'm anticipating for it to be a combination of a good performance, a building up, and perhaps maybe giving us a result that we should have had against them. And a clean sheet would be a perfect way to do that. So absolutely. Oh well, thank you very much. That's we know there's other people out there, so if we respect everyone who takes the time to create Celtic content. But if you want to join us, then we are, of course, fully grateful for it. Thank you very much, Red Scotland. That is very much appreciated. It's a Red Scotland. We've got a Scotland squad. There's some Celts in there. It's a good sign, particularly just for Forest Day. I think that's
100%.
fully deserved.
Yeah, fully deserved. I'm delighted to see James Forrest in there. He's been exceptional the past couple of weeks, and fully deserves it. It's actually his first call up since the last Euros 3 years ago. So obviously that tournament was delayed by a year. So good to see him back in, and he's shown in the past that he can be a key figure for Scotland. You look at scored a hat-trick against Israel in 2018, 2019 in the Nations League. So I'm really hoping he can go in and have an impact in the games like he has done for Celtic.
Yeah, no, it's a positive end to his season, and hopefully, as we say, we'll look towards the weekend to another positive end to the season. And it would be nice, and it would be poetic, would it not, if he contributes again, whether that's an assist, whether that's a goal. And I think if he were to get a goal in that game and Celtic were to go on and win, then it would be what an end to a season. I think it would just be somewhat poetic, isn't it? Talking about that impact, and it would just be the icing on the James Forrest cake for the remainder of this season. We've seen
100%. I think the only thing more poetic than that would be Joe Hart winning it in a penalty shootout to score the goal.
Taking a penalty. Mate, I don't know if I can handle that. I don't know if I can do that. Well, thank you very much, Josh, for joining us again this afternoon. It's been a pleasure as always, and thank you to everybody who's been watching us live. And again, thanks if you are watching us at a later date retrospective. We know that these early afternoon kickoffs, particularly during the week, aren't for everybody, and there is obviously a selection out there. So we are grateful for anybody that's taking the time to watch us. So we'll be back throughout the course of the week. We'll have more to chat about, and of course, we'll be looking at the Friday. That's going to be the big one. It'll be Paddy and I that'll be here to cover that in all of its glory. And then we should be there over the weekend. Maybe not the Saturday. Paddy's probably going to have a couple of beers. I'll be at the game. Yourself as well. Josh will be taking in the game. So, we'll try and get it out in a timely fashion. But either way, we'll be hoping for a win. And we'll be here again throughout the course of the week. So we'll see when we get back. If you haven't done it again, just make sure, give us a wee subscribe, give us a like. The community is growing, and we thank you all for that. Okay. We'll see you again through the week. Until then, hail, hail, take care. See you all later.